The fluorescent lights of St. Mary's Hospital hummed with the relentless energy of a place that never slept, casting harsh shadows across the linoleum floors that had seen more tragedy and triumph than most cathedrals. At 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday in March 1993, the emergency ward buzzed with its usual chaos. Ambulance sirens wailing in the distance, the steady beep of monitors, and the soft-soled footsteps of medical staff moving with practiced urgency. Prince Adrian Dracul stood in the hospital's main entrance, his expensive Italian suit completely out of place among the sterile whites and practical scrubs. For 2 centuries, he had lived a life of unimaginable luxury and crushing boredom, moving through vampire society's endless cycle of political intrigue and hedonistic pleasures. Tonight, driven by a restlessness he couldn't name, he had abandoned yet another tedious court gathering to walk among humans. He had expected to find the usual human drama: fear, desperation, the messy emotions that vampires found either amusing or distasteful. What he hadn't expected was to find purpose standing in a pair of worn sneakers and faded scrubs. Sarah Chen was leaning against the nurse's station, her dark hair escaping from a ponytail that had given up hours ago, her brown eyes fighting a losing battle against exhaustion. She swayed slightly on her feet, caught herself, and immediately reached for a patient chart with the kind of dedication that spoke of something deeper than mere professional duty. Adrian watched, fascinated, as she forced herself upright and began walking toward room 314, her steps careful but determined. She had been on her feet for 18 hours straight. He could smell the fatigue radiating from her like heat from a fever. Any reasonable person would have gone home hours ago. But Sarah Chen, Adrian was beginning to realize, was not reasonable. She was something far more dangerous. She was extraordinary. "Excuse me," Adrian said, his voice carrying the subtle compulsion that made humans naturally inclined to trust him. "You look like you could use some help." Sarah turned, and Adrian felt something he hadn't experienced in decades: surprise. Her eyes, despite their exhaustion, were sharp with intelligence and wariness. The compulsion that worked on every human he'd ever encountered seemed to slide off her like water off glass. "I'm sorry, visiting hours ended at 9, she said, her voice hoarse but professional. "If you're looking for someone, I'm looking for you, actually." The words came out before Adrian could stop them, and he saw Sarah's hand move instinctively toward the panic button at her belt. "I mean, I'm looking for someone who needs help, and you look like you're about to collapse." Sarah's laugh was sharp and bitter. "Yeah, well, welcome to healthcare. We're all about to collapse." She studied his face, taking in the expensive clothes, the perfect features that belonged more in a magazine than a hospital corridor. "Are you lost? Because this isn't exactly the kind of place people in $1,000 suits usually end up at 3 in the morning." "I'll take your shift," Adrian said impulsively. The words hung in the air between them, absurd and impossible. Sarah stared at him for a long moment, then laughed again, this time with genuine humor. "If only it were that easy," she said, shaking her head. "Look, Mr. Adrian, I appreciate the offer, really, but unless you've got a nursing degree hidden under that designer jacket, I'm afraid you can't help me." She turned to go, but Adrian caught her arm gently. The moment his skin touched hers, he felt it, a jolt of something that went beyond physical attraction, beyond the usual predatory interest he felt toward humans. It was recognition, as if some part of his soul that had been dormant for centuries had suddenly awakened. "Please," he said, and for the first time in 200 years, the word came out as a genuine request rather than a command. "Let me help somehow." Sarah looked down at his hand on her arm, then back up at his face. Whatever she saw there made her expression soften slightly. "Room 314, she said quietly. "Mrs. Patterson, she's dying, and she's alone. Her family couldn't make it from Portland, and she's scared." Sarah's voice cracked slightly. "I was going to sit with her for a while, but I have 6 other patients who need medication, and Mr. Rodriguez in 308 is asking for ice chips every 10 minutes because it's the only thing that helps with his nausea." "I'll sit with Mrs. Patterson," Adrian said without hesitation. "You don't understand. She's dying." "Yes, I heard you." Adrian's voice was gentle. "I'm not afraid of death, Sarah. Are you?" Something in his tone made her look at him more carefully. "How did you know my name?" Adrian glanced at her name tag, but Sarah followed his gaze and realized it had been turned around for the past hour. She'd been too tired to notice. Lucky guess, he said, echoing words he'd heard in a dozen movies. You look like a Sarah. It was a weak excuse, but Sarah was too exhausted to pursue it. She looked toward room 314, then back at Adrian, weighing her options. You can't give her medication, you can't make medical decisions, all you can do is sit there and be present. Sometimes that's enough. Sarah studied his face for another long moment, then nodded slowly. Room 314, Mrs. Patterson. Tell her that Sarah will check on her in an hour. I will. As Sarah walked away, Adrian felt something shift inside his chest, a warmth he hadn't experienced since his human life ended 2 centuries ago. He made his way to room 314, where he found a frail woman in her 70s lying in the narrow hospital bed, her breathing shallow and labored. Mrs. Patterson, he said softly. She opened her eyes, and Adrian saw fear there, not of him, but of the darkness that was coming for her. I'm Adrian, he said, settling into the chair beside her bed. Sarah asked me to sit with you for a while. Sarah's a good girl, Mrs. Patterson whispered. Works too hard. Yes, she does. Are you family? Adrian considered the question. I'm a friend. Mrs. Patterson nodded and closed her eyes. I'm scared, she admitted. I know, Adrian said, and without thinking, he reached out and took her hand. But you're not alone. For the next hour, Adrian sat with Mrs. Patterson listening to her stories about her late husband, her children, the garden she would never see bloom again. When her breathing became more labored, he used the smallest touch of his vampire abilities, not to heal, which was beyond his power, but to ease her pain, to bring her peace. Mrs. Patterson died at 4:23 a.m., slipping away so quietly that Adrian almost missed the moment. But he felt it, the exact instant when her soul left her body, when the fear left her eyes and was replaced by something that looked almost like relief. Sarah found him there 20 minutes later, still holding the dead woman's hand. She's gone, he said simply. Sarah nodded, unsurprised. She'd seen enough death to recognize its aftermath. Was it peaceful? Yes. She wasn't afraid at the end. Sarah moved to the other side of the bed and gently closed Mrs. Patterson's eyes. Thank you, she said, for being here. It matters more than you know. Adrian watched Sarah work, noting the gentle way she arranged Mrs. Patterson's hands, the quiet dignity with which she treated the dead. There was something sacred in her movements, something that spoke of a deep respect for life and death that Adrian had forgotten existed. I should go, he said, standing. Wait. Sarah looked up at him. I never asked. What were you doing here? Really? Adrian paused at the doorway. I was looking for something, he said honestly. Did you find it? He looked back at her, this exhausted nurse who had trusted a stranger with her patient's final moments, and felt that warmth in his chest grow stronger. I think so, he said. Adrian left the hospital as dawn was breaking over the city, but he couldn't stop thinking about what he'd experienced. For 2 centuries, he had been going through the motions of existence, attending court functions and managing his vast wealth with the same enthusiasm most people reserved for doing taxes. But those few hours in the hospital had awakened something in him that he'd thought was dead forever. Purpose. The next night he returned. He didn't seek out Sarah immediately. Instead, he wandered the halls, observing the controlled chaos of the night shift. He watched nurses like Sarah moving from room to room, carrying impossible caseloads with grace and determination. He saw doctors making life and death decisions on too little sleep and too much caffeine. He witnessed families saying goodbye to loved ones, and others celebrating miraculous recoveries. It was messy and painful and beautiful in a way that vampire society, with all its refined cruelty and elegant boredom, could never be. On his 3rd night, Sarah noticed him. You're back, she said, not sounding entirely surprised. I am. Why? Adrian considered several possible answers. That he was curious about human nature, that he found the hospital fascinating, that he had nothing better to do. All of them were partially true, but none of them captured the real reason. Because this place matters, he said finally. What you do here matters. Sarah studied his face. You're not like most people, are you? No, Adrian said honestly. I'm not. Are you rich? Is that why you have so much free time to hang around hospitals? Something like that. Sarah nodded slowly. Well, if you're going to keep showing up, you might as well make yourself useful. Can you read? Yes. Good. Mrs. Kim in room 302 loves being read to, but I haven't had time in 3 days. Think you can handle that? I think I can manage. And so began Adrian's unofficial career as a hospital volunteer. Night after night, he returned to St. Mary's, finding small ways to help. He read to patients who couldn't sleep, sat with families during long surgeries, and fetched countless cups of coffee for overworked staff. But more than that, he began using his vampire abilities in subtle ways that no one could detect. A touch here and there to ease pain, a whispered suggestion to help someone find peace, the occasional use of his supernatural speed to be in 2 places at once when the staff was overwhelmed. He was careful, so careful that even Sarah, who was more observant than most, didn't notice anything unusual. She just knew that patients seemed to recover faster when Adrian was around, that families found comfort more easily, that the night shift ran more smoothly when he was there. "You're like a good luck charm," she told him one night after a particularly difficult shift had ended with 3 successful surgeries and no losses. "I prefer to think of myself as helpful," Adrian replied. "That too." Sarah looked at him curiously. "Don't you have a job, a family, something that requires you to be somewhere during normal human hours?" "I keep unusual hours," Adrian said, which was true enough. "And my family, let's just say we don't see eye to eye on most things. What do they think about you spending your nights in a hospital? They think I'm wasting my time." "Are you?" Adrian looked around the hospital corridor, taking in the familiar sights and sounds that had become more home to him than his ancestral castle ever had. "No," he said. "I don't think I am." 6 months into his nightly visits, Adrian made his first real save. It was a car accident victim, a teenage boy named Marcus who had been brought in with massive internal bleeding and a traumatic brain injury. The doctors had done everything they could, but it wasn't enough. The boy was dying, and his parents were being prepared for the worst. Adrian found himself alone with Marcus at 2 a.m., when the ICU was quiet except for the steady beep of machines. The boy's life force was flickering like a candle in the wind, and Adrian could feel death hovering in the room like a patient predator. He looked around to make sure he was unobserved, then placed his hands on Marcus's chest and let a small amount of his vampire healing energy flow into the boy's broken body. It was risky. If anyone detected what he was doing, it would raise questions he couldn't answer. But watching this child die when he had the power to prevent it was unthinkable. The healing took everything Adrian had. When it was over, he collapsed in the chair beside Marcus's bed, drained and shaking. But the boy's breathing was stronger, his heartbeat steadier. The internal bleeding had stopped, and the swelling in his brain was already beginning to reduce. Marcus woke up 3 days later, asking for his mother and wondering why everyone was crying. The doctors called it a miracle, the kind of inexplicable recovery that medical science couldn't explain but had to accept. Sarah found Adrian in the hospital chapel that night, staring at the simple wooden cross with an expression she couldn't read. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said, settling into the pew beside him. "Something like that. Marcus is going to make a full recovery. Did you hear?" "I heard. The doctors are calling it impossible. His brain scans from 3 days ago showed massive trauma, but now..." Sarah shook her head. "It's like it never happened." Adrian said nothing, but Sarah noticed his hands were shaking slightly. "Are you all right?" she asked. "Just tired." Sarah studied his profile in the dim light of the chapel. "You care about them, don't you? The patients, don't you?" "Of course. But I'm trained for this. I chose this life. You just showed up one night and decided to stay. Why?" Adrian turned to look at her, and Sarah was struck by the depth of sadness in his eyes. "Because for the first time in a very long time I feel like I'm doing something that matters." "What did you do before? Before you started coming here?" "Nothing," Adrian said simply. "Nothing that mattered." Over the following months, Adrian's nocturnal presence at St. Mary's became as much a part of the hospital's rhythm as the changing of shifts. The staff grew accustomed to seeing him in the halls, and patients began asking for the nice man who reads stories, or the gentleman who sits with families. But it was Sarah who became the center of Adrian's world. He found himself timing his arrivals to coincide with her shifts, looking forward to their brief conversations between crises. He learned that she had become a nurse after her younger brother died of leukemia, that she lived alone in a small apartment with 2 rescue cats, that she read mystery novels, and collected vintage teacups, and had never been outside the United States. In return, he shared carefully edited versions of his own story, that he came from old money, that he'd lost his family young, that he'd spent years traveling the world looking for something to give his life meaning. "And you found it in a hospital?" Sarah asked one night as they shared coffee in the break room. "I found it in the people who work in hospitals," Adrian corrected. "People like you." Sarah blushed, and Adrian felt that now familiar warmth spread through his chest. Somewhere along the way, his fascination with her dedication had deepened into something more dangerous. He was falling in love with a human. The realization should have sent him running. Vampire-human relationships were complicated under the best circumstances, and these were far from the best circumstances. Sarah didn't even know what he was, and he couldn't tell her without putting her in danger. But he couldn't stay away either. "Sarah," he said one night as they walked through the hospital's garden during her break, "if you could have anything in the world, what would it be?" She considered the question seriously. "More time," she said finally. "More time with the people I care about, more time to help patients, more time to see the world. Time is the one thing you can never get back, you know." Adrian nodded, though the irony wasn't lost on him. He had all the time in the world, but until he'd met Sarah, he'd never known what to do with it. "What about you?" she asked. "What would you want?" "To matter," Adrian said without hesitation. "To know that my existence makes a difference." "It does," Sarah said softly. "You've made a difference here. To the patients, to their families, to me. To you?" Sarah stopped walking and turned to face him. "Adrian, I don't know what your story is, and I get the feeling you're not ready to tell me, but I want you to know that these past months, having you here, knowing I can count on you, it's meant everything." Adrian felt something crack open in his chest, a wall he'd built around his heart centuries ago finally crumbling. "Sarah, I know this is complicated," she said quickly. "I know you're not ordinary, but I also know that you're good and kind, and that you care about people in a way that's rare in this world. You don't know what you're saying, don't I?" Sarah stepped closer, and Adrian caught her scent, soap and coffee and something uniquely her that made his dead heart ache with longing. "I've been a nurse for 8 years, Adrian. I've learned to read people, to see past what they show the world to who they really are. And you're someone who's been hurt, who's been alone for a long time, but who still chooses to help others. Sarah, I'm not asking for anything you can't give," she said. "I'm just asking you to know that you matter. To me, you matter." Before Adrian could respond, Sarah's pager went off. She glanced at it and sighed. "Emergency in the ER," she said. "I have to go." She started to walk away, then turned back. "Think about what I said, okay?" Adrian watched her disappear into the hospital, his mind reeling. Sarah's words had awakened something in him that he'd thought was dead forever. Hope. Hope that he could be more than just a predator pretending to be civilized. Hope that he could find redemption in service to others. Hope that maybe, somehow, he could deserve the love of someone as extraordinary as Sarah Chen. But hope, Adrian knew, was the most dangerous emotion of all. 2 years into Adrian's nightly vigil at St. Mary's, the impossible happened. Sarah began to suspect the truth. It started with small things. The way patients seemed to recover faster when Adrian was around. The way he never seemed to get sick despite being exposed to every virus and bacteria the hospital had to offer. The way he moved through the corridors with a grace that seemed almost supernatural. But it was the night of the mass casualty event that changed everything. A multi-car accident on the interstate had brought in 17 victims, overwhelming the emergency department's capacity. Sarah had been working for 14 straight hours when the ambulances started arriving, and the staff was stretched beyond their limits. Adrian had been in the family waiting room, comforting the relatives of a surgery patient, when the chaos erupted. He heard Sarah's voice over the intercom, calling for all available personnel, and something in her tone made his blood run cold. He found her in Trauma Bay 3, working frantically over a young woman whose life was slipping away, despite every intervention the medical team could provide. Sarah's scrubs were soaked with blood, her face pale with exhaustion and desperation. "Come on, Emma," Sarah whispered to the unconscious patient. "Don't give up on me now." But Adrian could see what Sarah couldn't. The woman's life force was fading, her soul preparing to depart. In minutes, maybe seconds, she would be gone. Without thinking, Adrian moved to the opposite side of the bed and placed his hands on Emma's chest, just below where Sarah was working. He let his vampire healing energy flow into the dying woman, carefully, subtly, so that it would appear to be the result of the medical team's efforts. The effect was immediate. Emma's vital signs stabilized, her breathing strengthened, and color began to return to her face. The monitors that had been screaming warnings fell silent, replaced by the steady beep of a strong, healthy heartbeat. "That's impossible," one of the doctors breathed. "Her injuries were too severe. She should be—" "She's stable," Sarah said, her voice filled with wonder. "All her vitals are normal. It's like—" She looked up and met Adrian's eyes across the bed. "It's like a miracle." Adrian saw the exact moment when suspicion bloomed in Sarah's intelligent brown eyes. She'd seen too many of these miracles when he was around, and her scientific mind was finally connecting the dots. "Adrian," she said carefully, "could you help me get some supplies from the storage room?" He nodded, following her out of the trauma bay and down a quiet corridor to a supply closet that was rarely used during night shifts. Sarah closed the door behind them and turned to face him, her expression serious. "I need to ask you something," she said, "and I need you to tell me the truth. Sarah, are you human?" The question hung in the air between them like a blade. Adrian felt the weight of 2 years of deception, of carefully constructed lies and half-truths. He could lie again, could use his vampire abilities to make her forget her suspicions. But looking into her eyes, seeing the trust and hope there, he found he couldn't do it. "No," he said simply. "I'm not." Sarah nodded slowly, as if she'd been expecting that answer. "What are you? Does it matter?" "It matters to me." Adrian closed his eyes, feeling the last of his carefully constructed walls crumble. "I'm a vampire, Sarah. I'm 237 years old, and I've spent most of that time doing terrible things. Until I met you." He waited for her to scream, to run, to call security. Instead, Sarah stepped closer. "Show me," she said. "What?" "Show me what you are. I need to see." Adrian hesitated, then let his vampire nature surface. His eyes shifted from blue to silver, his canine teeth elongated into fangs, and an otherworldly aura of power settled around him like a cloak. Sarah stared at him for a long moment, taking in his transformed appearance. Then, to his amazement, she reached out and touched his face. "You're beautiful," she whispered. "I'm a monster." "No," Sarah said firmly. "You're not. Monsters don't spend their nights helping sick children. Monsters don't sit with dying patients so they won't be alone. Monsters don't save lives. You're not afraid." "I'm terrified," Sarah admitted. "But not of you. I'm afraid of what this means, of how it changes things between us. It doesn't have to change anything, doesn't it?" Sarah's voice was soft but steady. "Adrian, you're immortal. You'll live forever while I grow old and die. How is that supposed to work?" Adrian let his vampire features recede, becoming human in appearance once again. "I don't know," he said honestly. "I've never been in this situation before." "What situation?" "Being in love with a human." The words slipped out before he could stop them, and Adrian saw Sarah's eyes widen with surprise and something that might have been joy. "You love me?" she asked. "More than I thought possible. More than I've ever loved anything in 2 centuries of existence." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, processing this revelation. "The healing," she said finally. "The patients who recover when they shouldn't. That's you, isn't it?" "Yes." "How many?" "I don't keep count." "Hundreds?" "Probably." Sarah leaned against the supply shelf, overwhelmed. "You've been saving lives for 2 years, and no one knows. No one gets the credit." "I don't need credit. I need purpose. And you found it here." "I found it with you." Sarah looked up at him, and Adrian saw a decision forming in her eyes. "I have a proposition for you. I'm listening. If you really want to help, if you really want to save lives, then let's do it properly. Let's make you official." "Official?" "A consultant. Someone who works with the medical team instead of hiding in the shadows. We could save so many more people if we worked together." Adrian stared at her, hardly daring to believe what he was hearing. "You want to work with me? Knowing what I am?" "I want to work with you because of what you are. Adrian, you have abilities that could revolutionize medicine. You could help us save patients that we lose every day. And you're not concerned about the complications? You mean the fact that you're a vampire? That you drink blood and are technically dead?" Sarah shrugged. "I work in a hospital. I've seen stranger things." "Have you?" Okay, maybe not stranger, but definitely weirder. Despite everything, Adrian found himself smiling. You're remarkable, you know that? I'm practical, and I'm tired of watching people die when I know there's someone who could save them. It would be dangerous. If other vampires found out what I was doing, then we'll be careful. We'll be smart about it. But Adrian, we can't waste this opportunity. We can't waste what you could do. Adrian looked into Sarah's eyes and saw the same dedication that had drawn him to her 2 years ago. The same fierce determination to help others regardless of the cost to herself. She was offering him something he'd never dared to dream of, a chance to use his nature for good, openly and without shame. All right, he said. Let's do it. The transformation of Adrian from mysterious volunteer to official night consultant took 6 months of careful planning and creative paperwork. Sarah worked with Dr. Elizabeth Warren, the chief of emergency medicine, to create a position that would allow Adrian to work with patients without raising too many questions about his unconventional methods. He's from Europe, Sarah explained to Dr. Warren. He has training in alternative healing techniques that aren't recognized here, but his results speak for themselves. Dr. Warren, who had noticed the dramatic improvement in patient outcomes during night shifts, was willing to overlook the irregularities in Adrian's credentials in exchange for his obvious effectiveness. I don't care if he learned medicine from Tibetan monks, she said. If he can keep saving lives like this, he can stay. Adrian's official duties were vague enough to give him flexibility, while specific enough to satisfy hospital administration. He was listed as a holistic healing consultant who specialized in pain management and patient comfort. His vampire abilities allowed him to work with patients in ways that appeared natural, but were actually supernatural. A touch to ease pain became therapeutic massage. His ability to sense when someone was dying became exceptional diagnostic intuition. His supernatural speed became remarkable efficiency. But it was his partnership with Sarah that made everything possible. They developed a system of subtle signals in coded language that allowed them to communicate about patients without revealing Adrian's true nature to other staff members. Sarah would identify the most critical cases, and Adrian would find ways to help them that appeared to be the result of conventional medical intervention. Room 507 could use some of your special attention, Sarah would say, and Adrian would know that meant a patient was dying and needed his healing touch. The family in the waiting room looks like they could use some comfort, meant that Adrian should use his vampire abilities to ease their emotional pain while they waited for news. Dr. Martinez is having a difficult night was code for Adrian to subtly influence the doctor's decision-making to ensure the best possible outcomes for patients. Their partnership was seamless, built on trust and shared purpose. But as the months turned into years, Adrian began to notice something that filled him with both joy and terror. Sarah was aging. It was subtle at first. A few gray hairs, laugh lines around her eyes, a slight stiffness in her movements after long shifts. But to Adrian, who remained frozen at the physical age of 30, every change was magnified, every sign of time's passage, a reminder of the fundamental difference between them. By their 5th year working together, Sarah was 35 and beginning to show the wear of a demanding career. By their 10th year, she was 40, and starting to talk about the physical limitations that came with age. By their 15th year, she was 45, and Adrian could see the future stretching out before them like a road leading to a cliff. You're staring again, Sarah said one night as they sat in the break room after a particularly difficult shift. Sorry, what are you thinking about? Adrian hesitated. They had developed an easy intimacy over the years, a relationship that was deeper than friendship but had never crossed into romance. Both of them were too aware of the complications that would bring. Time, he said finally. What about it? You're getting older? Sarah laughed. Thanks for the reminder, as if my knees don't tell me that every morning. I'm serious, Sarah. You're aging, and I'm not. Every year the gap between us gets wider. Sarah's expression grew more serious. I know. Doesn't it bother you? Of course it bothers me. But what's the alternative? Should I stop living because I'm not immortal? You could be. The words slipped out before Adrian could stop them, and he saw Sarah freeze with her coffee cup halfway to her lips. What did you say? Nothing. Forget I said anything. Adrian. Sarah set down her cup and turned to face him fully. What did you mean? Adrian closed his eyes. Knowing he'd crossed a line he could never uncross. I could turn you. Make you like me. We could have forever. Forever. Yes. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, and Adrian could practically hear the wheels turning in her mind. What would that mean exactly? She asked finally. You'd be immortal. You'd never age, never get sick, never die of natural causes. And the downside? Adrian met her eyes. You'd have to drink blood to survive. You'd be sensitive to sunlight. And, he hesitated, and you'd lose some of your humanity, the deep empathy that makes you such an extraordinary nurse. It would be muted. Vampires feel emotions differently than humans do. Sarah absorbed this information. So I'd live forever, but I'd lose the very thing that makes me good at saving lives. Yes, that's quite a trade-off. It is. Sarah stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. Is that what you want, for me to become like you? I want you to live, Adrian said simply. I want us to have time. But I fell in love with your humanity, Sarah. Your compassion, your ability to connect with patients in ways that I never could. If you lost that, you might not love me anymore. I would always love you, but you might not be you anymore. Sarah turned back to him. How long do I have to decide? Years, decades if you're lucky. But Sarah, once you start showing serious signs of aging, it becomes more difficult. The transformation is easier on younger bodies. So, we're talking about a decision I'll need to make in the next 10 or 15 years. Probably. Sarah nodded slowly. Then let's table this conversation for now. We have work to do. But Adrian could see that the seed had been planted, and he knew that everything between them had changed. The years that followed were bittersweet. Adrian and Sarah continued their partnership, saving hundreds of lives and revolutionizing night shift care at St. Mary's. But underneath their professional collaboration was the constant awareness of time passing, of Sarah growing older while Adrian remained unchanged. They never spoke of the transformation again, but it hung between them like a ghost, influencing every conversation, every shared moment, every look that lasted a heartbeat too long. Adrian watched Sarah's hair turn silver, watched lines appear around her eyes, watched her movements become more careful and deliberate. But he also watched her grow into her role as senior nurse, watched her mentor younger staff members, watched her become a legend in the hospital for her skill and compassion. She's the best nurse I've ever worked with, Dr. Warren told Adrian one night. I've never seen anyone connect with patients the way she does. It's like she can see into their souls. Adrian nodded, knowing that Sarah's gift was exactly what he would be asking her to sacrifice if she chose immortality. On the night of their 20th anniversary as partners, Sarah found Adrian in the hospital chapel, the same place where they'd had so many important conversations over the years. 20 years, she said, settling into the pew beside him. 20 years, he agreed. Do you ever regret it? Coming here that first night? Never. Do you regret letting me stay? Never. Sarah was quiet for a moment. Adrian, I need to tell you something. I'm listening. I've been thinking about what you said, about the transformation. Adrian's heart clenched. And? I've made my decision. Sarah, let me finish. She turned to face him, and Adrian saw resolve in her eyes. I've spent 20 years watching you save lives, watching you use your abilities to help people, and I've realized something. What's that? Your humanity isn't gone. It's different from mine, but it's there. You care about people, you sacrifice for them, you dedicate your existence to helping them. That's not the behavior of a monster. But I also know that my humanity, the way I connect with patients, is my greatest strength. It's what makes me good at this job, and I can't give that up. Adrian felt something break inside his chest. So you've decided against the transformation. I've decided to live fully as a human for whatever time I have left. And I've decided to ask you for something. Anything. I want you to promise me that when I'm gone, you'll keep doing this. You'll keep saving lives. Keep being the person you've become. Don't let my death make you retreat back into the shadows. Sarah, promise me, Adrian. Adrian looked into her eyes and saw the same determination that had drawn him to her 20 years ago. I promise. Good. Sarah smiled. Now I have something else to tell you. What? I love you. I've loved you for years, and I wanted you to know before time makes it too complicated. Adrian felt tears he didn't know he could still shed prick his eyes. I love you too. More than I thought possible. I know. And that's enough. That has to be enough. They sat together in the chapel, holding hands and watching the candles flicker, both of them aware that they had just made a choice that would define the rest of their time together. Sarah had chosen mortality, and Adrian had chosen to honor that choice, even though it would mean watching the woman he loved grow old and die while he remained forever young. It was the most human thing either of them had ever done. 10 years later, Sarah Chen stood at the nurse's station on her final night shift, her silver hair pulled back in the same practical ponytail she'd worn for 3 decades, her brown eyes still sharp despite the lines that time had etched around them. At 55, she moved with the careful dignity of someone who had spent a lifetime caring for others and was finally ready to care for herself. Adrian watched her from across the corridor, marveling at how beautiful she remained to him. The years had changed her, yes, but they had also refined her, distilling her essence into something even more precious than the young nurse he'd fallen in love with decades ago. "Last night," she said when he approached the station. "Last night," he agreed. Sarah had announced her retirement 6 months earlier, citing a desire to travel and spend time with her sister's grandchildren. But Adrian knew the real reason. Her body was beginning to show the wear of 32 years in nursing, and she wanted to leave while she could still do the job with the excellence she demanded of herself. "Any regrets?" Adrian asked. "About retiring?" "No." "About the path I chose?" Sarah looked at him with eyes that held 3 decades of shared memories. "Never." They made their final rounds together, checking on patients they'd been caring for, saying goodbye to staff members who had become family. Adrian used his abilities one last time to ease the pain of a terminal cancer patient, to bring peace to a family facing an impossible decision, to help a young mother through a difficult delivery. "You're going to miss this," Sarah observed as they watched the new mother hold her baby for the first time. "I'm going to miss doing it with you. But you'll keep doing it. I promised you I would." "Good." Sarah smiled. "Because the world needs you, Adrian. It needs what you can do." As dawn approached, they found themselves back in the chapel where they'd had so many important conversations over the years. The familiar space felt different now, charged with the weight of endings and new beginnings. "I have something for you," Sarah said, reaching into her pocket and withdrawing a small wrapped package. Adrian opened it to find a vintage pocket watch, its silver surface engraved with an inscription, "Time is precious because it's limited. Use yours well. S." "Sarah, I can't." "You can and you will. It belonged to my grandfather. He was a doctor, and he always said that time was the most valuable thing we could give to others." Adrian held the watch carefully, feeling the weight of the gift and everything it represented. "Thank you. There's something else." Sarah's voice grew serious. "I need you to know that these 30 years working with you, loving you, they've been the best years of my life, not because they were easy, but because they mattered. They mattered to me too. I know, and I need you to remember that when I'm gone. Remember that love doesn't end with death, it just changes form." Adrian felt the familiar ache in his chest, the one that had been growing stronger as Sarah's retirement approached. "I don't know how to do this without you." "Yes, you do. You did it for 200 years before you met me. That wasn't living, that was just existing. Then don't go back to existing. Keep living. Keep caring. Keep being the man you became because of this place." As the sun rose over the city, painting the chapel windows in shades of gold and rose, Adrian made a decision. "Come with me," he said. "Where?" "Somewhere special. I want to show you something." They left the hospital together, walking through the quiet morning streets to a small park overlooking the river. Adrian led Sarah to a bench beneath an old oak tree, its branches heavy with spring leaves. "This is where I used to come," he said, "before I found the hospital, when I was lost and didn't know what to do with eternity. It's beautiful. I used to sit here and watch the sunrise, wondering what the point of immortality was if I had nothing meaningful to do with it." Sarah settled beside him on the bench. "And now? Now I know that meaning isn't something you find. It's something you create. And I created meaning with you." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the city wake up around them. Finally, Sarah spoke. "Adrian, I need to ask you something. Anything. When I'm really gone, not just retired, but gone, will you be all right?" Adrian considered the question seriously. "I don't know, but I know I'll keep going. I'll keep the promise I made to you." "Good, because there are so many people who still need saving, so many lives you can still touch. Will you stay in touch? During your retirement?" Sarah smiled. "Try to keep me away." I may be retiring from nursing, but I'm not retiring from caring about you." Over the following months, Adrian adjusted to life at the hospital without Sarah. It was harder than he'd expected. Not just because he missed her presence, but because she had been his anchor to humanity for so long that without her, he sometimes felt himself drifting back toward the cold detachment of his vampire nature. But he kept his promise. He continued working the night shift, continued using his abilities to save lives, continued being the bridge between the supernatural and the mundane that Sarah had helped him become. And Sarah kept her word too. She visited regularly, bringing stories of her travels and updates on the staff members they'd worked with over the years. She aged gracefully, her silver hair turning white, her movements becoming more careful, but her spirit remaining as vibrant as ever. "You look tired," she observed one evening when she found Adrian in the break room after a particularly difficult shift. "I am tired," he admitted. "Not physically, but emotionally. It's hard to care so much when you know you'll outlive everyone you save. Is that what you think? That caring is pointless because it's temporary? Isn't it?" Sarah sat down across from him, her expression serious. "Adrian, do you remember Mrs. Patterson, the first patient you sat with?" "Of course. She died 30 years ago, but her daughter became a nurse because of the kindness you showed her mother. Her daughter has saved hundreds of lives. Mrs. Patterson's grandson is a doctor now, inspired by the stories his mother told him about the man who made his grandmother's last hours peaceful." Adrian stared at her. "I didn't know. There are ripples, Adrian. Everything you do, every life you touch, creates ripples that spread out in ways you'll never see. The temporary nature of individual lives doesn't make caring pointless. It makes it precious. How do you know about Mrs. Patterson's family?" Sarah smiled. "I've been keeping track. Of all of them. All the patients you've saved over the years, all the families you've comforted. Do you want to know what I've found? Tell me. Miracles. Hundreds of them. People who lived because you were there, who went on to have children and grandchildren, who became doctors and teachers and artists because they were given a second chance. You've changed the world, Adrian. One life at a time." Adrian felt something shift inside him, a weight he hadn't realized he was carrying beginning to lift. "You've been researching this for years. I've been documenting it, creating a record of what you've accomplished, because I knew there would come a day when you'd need to remember why it matters." "Sarah, I'm dying, Adrian." The words hit him like a physical blow. "What?" "Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. I have maybe 6 months." Adrian felt the world tilt around him. "No. I can heal you. I can—" "You can't. I've already asked Dr. Warren to look at my scans. Even with your abilities, it's too advanced, too aggressive. There has to be something." "There is." Sarah reached across the table and took his hands. "You can let me go with dignity. You can honor the choice I made 30 years ago to live fully as a human. I can't lose you. You're not losing me. You're helping me complete the journey I chose." Adrian felt tears streaming down his face, and he didn't care who might see them. "I don't know how to say goodbye to you. You don't have to. Not yet. I still have time, and I want to spend it here, with you, doing what we've always done. Working, living, caring, making a difference." Sarah's final months were a masterclass in grace under pressure. She continued working reduced shifts, using her remaining time to mentor young nurses and share the wisdom she'd accumulated over 3 decades in the profession. Adrian stayed by her side, using his abilities to ease her pain and give her strength when her body began to fail. But he was careful not to extend her life beyond its natural span. That wasn't what she wanted, and he respected her choice. "I'm not afraid," she told him one night as they sat in the chapel during her last week. "I've lived a good life, a meaningful life. I've loved and been loved. What more can anyone ask for? More time. Time isn't about quantity, Adrian. It's about quality. And the quality of my time with you has been extraordinary." Sarah died on a Tuesday morning in spring, surrounded by the colleagues who had become her family, and the man who had been her partner in every way that mattered. Her last words were to Adrian, "Keep saving them. Keep being the miracle they need." The funeral was held at St. Mary's Chapel, packed with hundreds of people whose lives Sarah had touched over the years. Doctors and nurses, former patients and their families, administrators and janitors, all of them united in their love for a woman who had dedicated her life to caring for others. Adrian spoke at the service, his voice steady despite the grief that threatened to overwhelm him. Sarah Chen was the best of us, he said. She showed us that heroism isn't about grand gestures or superhuman abilities. It's about showing up day after day and choosing to care. She taught us that love isn't diminished by loss. It's made more precious by it. After the service, Dr. Warren approached Adrian with an envelope. "Sarah asked me to give this to you," she said. Inside was a letter in Sarah's familiar handwriting. "My dearest Adrian, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you're probably wondering what comes next. Let me tell you, you're going to grieve, and that's good. Grief is love with nowhere to go, and you have so much love to give. But don't let grief become your prison. Let it be your teacher. You're going to want to retreat, to go back to the shadows where it's safe. Don't. The world needs you now more than ever. The patients need you. The staff needs you. The future needs you. I've arranged for you to receive official recognition as the hospital's director of holistic care. It's a new position, created specifically for you. Dr. Warren knows what you are and what you can do, and she's committed to protecting your secret while maximizing your impact. Keep saving lives, my love. Keep being the bridge between worlds. Keep proving that monsters can choose to be heroes. And remember, I'm not really gone. I'm in every life you save, every family you comfort, every moment of hope you create. I'm in the ripples we made together, spreading out into infinity. Love always, Sarah P.S. Check the chapel. I left something for you there." Adrian found his way to the chapel, his heart heavy with grief, but also touched by wonder at Sarah's final gift. On the altar was a small plaque that read, "In memory of all those who choose to care, and in honor of those who helped them do it." Beside the plaque was a journal, Sarah's journal, filled with 30 years of notes about their work together, about the lives they'd saved, about the difference they'd made. The final entry was dated just a week before her death. "Today, Adrian saved a little girl who reminded me of myself at that age. Determined, scared, but fundamentally hopeful. Watching him work, seeing the gentleness with which he used his abilities, I was reminded once again that we are all capable of transformation. He began as a monster and became a healer. I began as a broken child and became a caregiver. We found each other across the impossible divide between species and created something beautiful together. The work continues. The love continues. The hope continues. That's enough. That's everything." Adrian closed the journal and looked around the chapel that had been witness to so many of their conversations, so many of their decisions, so many of their moments of doubt and determination. Sarah was right. The work continued, and he would continue it, carrying her memory and her wisdom with him into whatever came next. 5 years later, Adrian stood in the same chapel, but everything had changed. St. Mary's Hospital now boasted one of the lowest mortality rates in the country, thanks in large part to the revolutionary holistic care program he had developed. Young medical professionals came from around the world to study his methods, never suspecting that his intuitive healing techniques were actually supernatural abilities refined over centuries of existence. He had kept his promise to Sarah. He had kept saving lives, kept caring, kept being the miracle that patients needed. But more than that, he had learned to find joy in the work again, to see each saved life not as a temporary victory against inevitable loss, but as a permanent addition to the sum total of good in the world. "Dr. Blackthorne?" A young nurse appeared in the chapel doorway. "We have a situation in the ER. A car accident victim, and the family is asking for you specifically." Adrian nodded, pocketing Sarah's journal, which he carried with him always. "I'll be right there." As he walked through the hospital corridors, he felt Sarah's presence with him, not as a ghost or a memory, but as a living part of who he had become. She had taught him that love doesn't end with death, it just changes form, and the love they had shared had transformed into something larger than either of them could have imagined. A commitment to healing that would outlast any individual life, a dedication to caring that would ripple out through generations. In the ER, he found a family huddled around a teenage boy who had been brought in with severe injuries. The parents looked up at him with desperate hope, and Adrian saw in their eyes the same trust that Sarah had shown him 30 years ago when she'd asked him to sit with Mrs. Patterson. "Please," the mother whispered, "can you help him?" Adrian placed a gentle hand on the boy's forehead, feeling the familiar warmth of his healing abilities flow through him. "Yes," he said simply, "I can help." And as he worked, using powers that had once marked him as a monster to save yet another life, Adrian felt Sarah's words echo in his heart. Keep being the miracle they need. He had found his purpose in a hospital corridor 30 years ago, when an exhausted nurse had trusted a stranger with her patient's final moments. He had offered to take her shift, and she had given him a life worth living. Now every night he continued to take that shift. Not just Sarah's, but the shift of caring for humanity itself. And he would keep taking it, one patient at a time, one family at a time, one miracle at a time, for as long as eternity lasted, because some promises are worth keeping forever. What an incredible journey of love, purpose, and sacrifice. Adrian's transformation from a bored vampire prince to a dedicated healer shows us that meaning in life comes not from how long we live, but from how we choose to spend our time. Which moment touched you most deeply? When Adrian first offered to take Sarah's shift? When she discovered his true nature and chose to work with him anyway? Or her final decision to embrace her mortality rather than become immortal? If you enjoyed this beautiful tale of finding purpose through love and service,